Adam Penn, editor of Genius MLKX. You didn't work on the previous seasons, but this season is the first time Genius has covered two figures. So, what were discussions like about balancing these two stories of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X?
Yeah, it was interesting, especially from an editorial standpoint. The sort of overarching kind of goal with this season was not to present a museum piece. This is not a filmed textbook, which would be easy to do with these two icons. Um, so what that meant really was kind of getting in there, lifting the layers and getting in there and getting really subjective with sound and with visuals and presenting sort of the parallels and the differences in these two men who a lot of us know a lot about, but not everything. So it was kind of a fascinating experiment, and also to kind of see how it evolved from the script form. Because initially, um, especially with the first episode, there was a lot of intercutting between the two. Scene with Martin, scene with Malcolm, bounce back and forth. And then we put that all together, and it's like, it's cool, it's great, the actors are great, but it doesn't, bouncing around so much doesn't allow us to get kind of emotionally invested in these guys. So we did a lot of playing around in the cutting room and moving scenes around, and we ended up with kind of just going with there's a little intercutting at the top, and then we kind of go on a run with Malcolm for a while and just get into his story and see his, the origins of him and his philosophy, and then we kind of switched gears and went to Martin, and then kind of at the end we did a little more intercutting.
Hmm. Yeah, and the premiere, you're covering from their childhoods up, like through college essentially. So there is like a lot of footage because it's not just like, one like day in their lives or something. So what was it like deciding what pieces to use and like how much to highlight like in their childhood and like or in their adolescence?
Yeah, there was a lot more than what ended up in the cut. And a lot of it was, all the actors were great, but we also wanted to get, our two leads, the Aaron and Kelvin are spectacular, and we wanted to get to them because they're so amazing. So what that meant was, I believe almost every scene of the two as children were represented in the finished show, but some were more pieces. Like we kind of little snippets of larger scenes that ended up in there.
Mhm. I think something that's so interesting about the show is that, or actually, like, in real life, the two of them only met once, and the show doesn't invent another meeting or anything between them. And it's obviously showing these parallel stories of them and showing how they have a lot in common, even though on the surface they seem very different. So, what challenges does that present to you as an editor when your leads only interact once on screen, but you're trying to tell a unified story?
Yeah, it was interesting, because I usually take my cues in the cutting room from the performances, as far as like just the rhythm of everything. And both actors had different styles. Aaron was very kind of serious and, you know just very serious and intense, and Kelvin was a little was warmer and looser, and so it was sort of a balance of kind of presenting them a little differently, but also, you know narratively there are parallels. They both were largely influenced by their fathers and their mothers somewhat too. So kind of the parallels were narrative, but the differences were hopefully represented in the style that we presented each storyline.
Hmm. I think it's also like a testament, to the editing, in here and like some other shows where like leads don't interact, but you're so immersed in the story that you don't even realize that they're not interacting. Like is that something you're thinking about too? Is like I know they're not gonna share the screen again, but we still need to make it feel like they are.
Yeah, I mean, they're both the leads, so it's like it's important to make it feel that way, which was a challenge, but I think it worked out, and a lot of that is because of how kind of similar their trajectories were, and then you kind of watch them veer, which is was really cool.
Hmm. And you also edited the fifth episode, which focuses on their wives, Coretta Scott King and Betty Shabazz, and it's very similar to the premiere. Like we see them from, their youth to adulthood. So, what was your approach to that one, showing everything from their perspective?
Uh, it was honestly a similar approach. Again, taking my cues from the actors and their performances as far as that's where I start. It's my starting point. But then, yeah, just kind of getting in there and trying to make it as subjective and non-textbooky as possible. One thing I loved about this show is that I feel like every episode kind of had a different vibe. I did a later episode that was almost like a paranoid 70s thrill, like The Conversation. So it was just really fun to kind of uh, take this one story, but present it in all these different ways throughout their lives.
Hmm. And you worked with, or there are other editors who worked on the show. So what was like passing the baton off to them and like getting the baton back from them and like also seeing their cuts of their episodes?
It was cool. I mean, we all ultimately took our cues from the showrunners and producers, Reggie, Gina, and Dame and Raph. Um, but there was a lot of conversations with other editors throughout as far as music, temp score, sound, all that, all those little details that you don't necessarily consciously think about that are there. And it was fun to kind of set the tone. Like I said earlier, this sort of subjective nature, like getting in these guys' heads a little bit, and then sort of seeing how that plays out throughout the rest of the series.
Hmm. Yeah, sure. What was your favorite scene to cut for the show?
Well, there were I loved cut. There's a lot of speeches in this season, a lot, and I loved cutting them. I was very nervous cutting them because a speech can can be really boring, but it wasn't in this case. Like just watching somebody give a speech, but the actors were great, and it was just fun to kind of navigate, at least from an editing standpoint, when to sort of step on the gas cutting wise in these speeches and when to kind of lay off, let the actors do their thing. I particularly love Malcolm's speech in prison towards the end of the first episode.
Mhm.
That was a really fun one, and I mean, again, it was daunting. There was so much footage for that speech and for all the speeches, really. Took quite a while to put together, but it was really rewarding because it's like again, it's like it's a little nerve-wracking. A speech can go off the rails, and it didn't. The actors really held it, and hopefully I supported that in my job as well.
Yeah, I love that the cut from that speech because he's just so energized and loud. He's like screaming basically in the prison, and then it cuts to Martin, and it's just like so low key and quiet. So it's like the energy change is really great as well. Well, was there anything you learned about either Martin Luther King or Malcolm X from working on the show that you didn't know before?
Oh yeah, that was one of the most exciting things about working on this. For instance, I had no idea that Martin tried to take his own life as a child. Like which is, I mean, he was just racked with guilt at his grandma dying, and it's it's a shocking thing to see. I never knew that happened, but it also really humanizes this icon that which was the goal of the show. We want to humanize these people and showing their triumphs, their flaws, their tragedies, all that stuff. So that's the one that sticks out. I think about that quite a bit.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like many people probably didn't know that, and so it's probably jarring to see it in the premiere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Adam, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time. We'll see you back in a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you.